what if everything about your life, your health, your mind, even your fate, was already decided before you were born? Not by destiny or divine will, but by a centuries-old obsession, keeping the bloodline pure. For generations, royal families across the world made a chilling exchange. They traded genetic health for power, marrying within their own family trees to preserve political alliances, dynasties, and thrones. The results? Shocking. We're talking about broken bodies, fading minds, and family trees so twisted they look more like loops than branches. In today's video, we're diving deep into the lives of history's most inbred women. Women who were born into palaces but lived with hidden suffering. And by the time we reach number 1, trust me, you'll see royalty in a very different light. Let's start at number 10, with Queen Isabella II of Spain. She ruled from 1833 to 1868, but her story isn't about royal grandeur. It's about the grim cost of keeping power in the family. Born in 1830, Isabella was welcomed into the world as a kind of consolation prize. Her father, King Ferdinand VII, had hoped desperately for a son. But when Isabella arrived, everyone quickly looked past their disappointment. What they didn't talk about, though, was the tangled web of genetics behind her birth. You see, her parents weren't just cousins. They were uncle and niece. That's already one level too close for comfort. But wait, it gets worse. Her grandparents on one side were also her great-grandparents on the other. It's like a royal family tree that loops in on itself. At just 16, Isabella was married off to her double second cousin. She had 11 children, but only 5 survived past infancy. And here's where things take a twist. Many historians believe her husband wasn't even the biological father of those surviving children. Their marriage was complicated, to say the least. In the end, Isabella lost her throne, but she left behind a legacy stained not just by political scandal, but by generations of genetic entrapment. At number 9 is Louise of Austria, a woman born into one of Europe's most deeply entangled dynasties. Her parents were double first cousins. That means they shared both sets of grandparents. Genetically, that's like pressing the family tree's copy-paste button over and over again. Out of 12 children, only 7 made it to adulthood. Marie-Louise had just 4 unique great-grandparents. For context, most people have 16. That's the kind of genetic compression scientists only see in extremely isolated populations. And yet, this wasn't just about family drama. At age 18, Marie-Louise was married off to Napoleon Bonaparte. Yes, that Napoleon, her father's former enemy. It was a political chess move, meant to bring peace and produce an heir, but for Marie-Louise, it was also the crushing weight of an empire placed directly on her shoulders. Jumping from royal palaces to a remote American town, number 8 is Lorraine Whitaker. And her story proves that inbreeding isn't just something out of history books. It's still happening today. Featured in a well-known documentary, Lorraine is part of the Whitaker family, whose legacy has become a case study in what happens when isolation and intermarriage continue for generations. She's believed to be one of the most genetically impacted individuals in recent memory, and her son, Timmy Whitaker, is often cited as possibly the most genetically affected living person today. What makes their story so haunting isn't just the physical or mental consequences. It's the realization that this isn't ancient history. It's a human story, still repeating itself in quiet corners of the world. At number 7, meet Maria I of Portugal, also called Maria the Pious, but some argue a more accurate name would be Maria the Troubled. Born in 1734, Maria's life was marked by growing mental strain and a royal bloodline packed with marriages that were way too close for comfort. Her parents, King Joseph I of Portugal and Maria Anna of Spain, were the 16th Iberian royal couple joined through close intermarriage. And Maria didn't break the cycle. She married her own uncle. The results? Devastating. Half her children didn't survive, likely due to genetic complications. As Maria aged, her mental health deteriorated so severely that she was declared unfit to rule. Her story isn't one of conquest or rebellion. It's the quieter tragedy of royalty crumbling under the weight of invisible inherited damage. Now let's talk about Marie-Louise Elizabeth d'Orléans, number 6 on our list, and perhaps one of the most tragic. Her life reads like a Gothic novel. She was born into a family stitched together by forced unions and royal expectations. Her father was pressured to marry his cousin, an illegitimate daughter of King Louis XIV. As the eldest surviving child, Marie-Louise didn't get much say in her future. She was married off to another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry. They had 3 children. None survived childhood. Whether it was due to overwhelming genetic factors or the weight of dynastic duty, we may never know. But here's one thing we do know. By the time she was 14, Marie-Louise was already turning to alcohol. That's not just shocking, it's heartbreaking. Was she trying to numb the pain, cry for help, or was she simply a casualty of a family system too tangled to escape? Her legacy is a reminder that even among palaces and titles, some lives are haunted by forces they never chose. Coming in at number 5 is Princess Alexia of Greece, born in 1965. Her story is different, not ancient, but modern. A reminder that the practice of keeping power in the family didn't disappear after the medieval era. Her parents, Queen Anna Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece, were both royalty and both related. They weren't just cousins once, they were cousins twice, second cousins and third cousins. That double bond wasn't just romantic, it was political. And like many royal marriages, it had a cost. Their shared ancestry twisted through generations of sibling marriages and cousin pairings. Constantine's great-grandparents were siblings. One of his grandmothers was the sister of his great-grandfather. It's a lot to take in. Although the marriage appeared happy, the legacy of inbreeding continued. Just like in the British royal family, where Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip were themselves closely related. Alexia's life is a modern echo of an old story. And we're only halfway there. In part 2, we'll meet a woman whose genes made her more inbred than the infamous Charles II of Spain, and 2 tiny mummies whose short lives carry a warning from ancient Egypt itself. At number 4, we meet a woman who's often forgotten, even though her genetic legacy might top them all, Maria Antonia of Austria. She was a member of the infamous Habsburg family, yes, that Habsburg family, the one known for its dramatic jawlines, strange family trees, and obsessive inbreeding. And if you thought Charles II of Spain was the ultimate example of the Habsburg downfall, wait until you hear about Maria Antonia. You see, her family tree wasn't even a tree anymore. It was more like a looping vine, a tangled web of repeated names, repeated faces, repeated marriages. Geneticists say her DNA was as close as that of a child born from 2 full siblings. Just imagine that. Maria Antonia was the genetic culmination of generations of decisions made in the name of dynasty and empire. She didn't start the pattern, but she lived the consequences. And somehow, history barely mentions her. No romanticized portraits, no dramatic documentaries, but in terms of raw biological legacy, she was the Habsburg dynasty's final warning sign, one that almost no one noticed. Let's go way back in time for number 3. We're talking about ancient Egypt, pharaohs, pyramids, and divine bloodlines. But behind all the gold in mythology lies a brutal reality preserved in the form of two tiny mummies, known only by their excavation numbers, 317A and 317B. They were infant daughters, believed to be stillborn, of none other than Pharaoh Tutankhamun and his queen, Ankhesenenemen. Sounds regal, right? But here's the twist. Ankhesenenemen wasn't just his queen, she was also his half-sister. That's right, Egypt's royal families didn't just marry close relatives, they often married siblings, believing it kept the bloodline divine, untouched by outsiders. But as generations of sibling marriage piled up, the risks grew. Tutankhamun himself was the product of years of genetic entanglement. His own health was fragile, and when his daughters were conceived, the genetic damage had hit a breaking point. Their mummified remains show signs of deformities, and their short lives are haunting reminders not even kings could escape the silent price of genetic compression. These two children never ruled. They never spoke a word, but thousands of years later, they're telling us a story we can't ignore. Switching gears, number 2 takes us far from ancient Egypt to one of the most disturbing modern cases of inbreeding ever recorded, the Cult's family of Australia. Kimberly Cult, her name changed for privacy, isn't royalty. There are no crowns or castles here, but her story is just as dark, maybe darker, because it happened in recent history. The Cult family lived in extreme isolation, creating what officials later described as a closed-loop community. Multiple generations intermarried with almost no outside contact. When authorities finally stepped in during the early 2000s, what they found was shocking. Children who couldn't speak properly, physical deformities, and a web of abuse that had been hidden away in plain sight. Kimberly, born into this environment, is considered one of the most genetically affected individuals ever documented. But her story isn't just about biology, it's about neglect, secrecy, and what happens when systems fail. Unlike the royals, Kimberly didn't have power or privilege, she had silence. And her story reminds us, inbreeding isn't just a historical footnote, it's a human tragedy that can still unfold today. And now, number 1, the woman who, more than anyone else, represents the extreme lengths some families went to in the name of bloodline purity. Cleopatra II, Philometer Sotera. Not the Cleopatra you're thinking of, not the one with eyeliner and Hollywood fame. This Cleopatra lived earlier and ruled longer, and her life was a masterclass in royal inbreeding. She was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek rulers of Egypt, who insisted on keeping power within the family. How? By marrying siblings, over and over again. Cleopatra II's parents were brother and sister, so were their grandparents, and she herself married both her brother and later her nephew. Her family tree didn't branch, it spiraled, a genetic cyclone. And this wasn't a one-off. The dynasty saw this as strategy. They believed that by keeping outsiders out, they were preserving not just power, but divine blood. But what they were really doing was doubling down on risk, again and again. Despite all that, Cleopatra II wasn't weak. She ruled alone for a time, outmaneuvered rivals, and even survived political coups. But behind the throne, her biology was bearing the weight of a dynasty obsessed with itself. She was, quite literally, the product of generations of self-interested ambition. And in many ways, her life marks the peak, the most extreme example of what can happen when power and genetics collide. From majestic palaces to remote villages, from gilded crowns to genetic spirals, these women weren't just historical figures, they were human lives shaped by choices they never made. The pursuit of purity, the obsession with power, the desire to control legacy, all of it left deep marks, not just in history books, but in bones, minds, and blood. Some of these women ruled empires, some barely survived childhood, but all of them were caught in a system that valued lineage more than life. And that's what makes their stories both tragic and unforgettable. Now, before we wrap things up, let's take a step back. All these stories, from Cleopatra II to Lorraine Whitaker, aren't just isolated horror stories of the past. They reflect a deeper human impulse, the obsession with control. control over lineage, over legacy, over the future. But what's the price of that control? In the case of these women, the cost was staggering. Not just their physical health, but their mental well-being, their freedom, the ability to choose who to love, who to marry, and who to be. Some were queens in name, but prisoners in reality, caged by custom, duty, and expectation. And what's even more disturbing, many of these dynasties knew the risks. They saw the stillbirths, the madness, the early deaths, but they continued anyway, believing that the bloodline was sacred, even when it was slowly turning toxic. We often look at royalty as glamorous, grand gowns, golden thrones, ballrooms, and power. But behind that illusion was a hidden cost, a silent suffering written into DNA. Let's break it down for a moment. When close relatives have children, the chances of recessive genetic disorders skyrocket. Normally, we all carry a few bad genes, if you will, but those mutations usually stay quiet unless both parents happen to carry the same one. Well, when you marry your cousin, or worse, your sibling, you dramatically increase the odds of matching up those mutations. That's when diseases appear, deformities, developmental issues, infertility, even mental illness. In small populations or isolated groups, this becomes even more dangerous. The gene pool gets smaller and smaller, and nature starts to fold in on itself. That's why so many of the people in this list faced mental instability, physical deformities, or reproductive struggles. It wasn't bad luck, it was biology. And it wasn't just royals. This kind of genetic compression has shown up everywhere, from Egyptian pharaohs to Appalachian mountain communities, from isolated tribes to modern criminal investigations. The pattern is always the same. When we try to play God with bloodlines, nature pushes back. And here's the part that really stings. These women, they didn't choose this. They were born into it. Take Maria I of Portugal. She didn't decide to be the 16th Iberian royal product of cousin marriage. She was expected to carry on the family name by marrying her uncle. Or look at Marie-Louise de Orleans, turning to alcohol before she was even 15. That wasn't a party lifestyle. It was a coping mechanism, a desperate escape from a life she never chose, locked in by blood and birthright. And Kimberly Cult, her story isn't from some dusty archive. It's from our generation. Her life is proof that without care, compassion, or oversight, history doesn't just repeat, it festers. We often say born into privilege when we talk about royals. But what kind of privilege is it really if it comes with shackles no one can see? You might be thinking, okay, but this was the past. That kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore, right? Well, not exactly. Yes, modern monarchies have reformed. Most royals today marry outside their immediate family. The old guard of Dynasty first has relaxed in favor of diplomacy, diversity, and modern values. But the mindset behind this obsession with purity still lingers in different forms. We see it in caste systems, in racism, in social hierarchies where who you were born to still determines how you're treated. We see it in the glorification of perfect bloodlines, whether in politics, religion, or even celebrity families. And in some remote or secretive communities, multi-generational inbreeding still exists, hidden, undocumented, and largely unspoken. So this isn't just history, it's a mirror. And if we're brave enough to look into it, these stories can teach us something profound about humility, science, and the cost of power. So, what do we take away from all of this? First, compassion. It's easy to mock royalty for their strange choices or shake our heads at families that repeated the same mistake for generations. But every name on this list was once a real person, a girl, a woman, a mother, caught in a system bigger than herself. Second, awareness. We must understand how biology, tradition, and power can create unseen damage when left unchecked. Not everything handed down through legacy is worth preserving. Some things should be broken, not honored. And third, maybe most importantly, this. No amount of power is worth sacrificing the future of a child. If history proves anything, it's that purity for power is a dangerous illusion. The more we try to preserve ourselves, the more we risk destroying what makes us human. So, there you have it. The dark, unsettling, and sometimes heartbreaking stories of history's most inbred women. They lived behind palace walls and velvet curtains, but their lives were anything but royal. If this story opened your eyes, leave a comment below. Which story shocked you the most? Which one made you feel something unexpected? And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss another deep dive into history's forgotten truths. We're uncovering the stories no one talks about, but everyone needs to hear. Next up, we're exploring the men who were born broken. A look at the kings, princes, and emperors who couldn't rule, walk, or even speak because their family trees had roots that grew too close. This is Lost Legends and Lore, and we're just getting started.